The Kirk's funeral looked more like a celebration than anything leftists did. You know, I don't really like this framing. I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't like the framing. I've seen this type of stuff. I've seen the Batista comparisons. I've seen the John. Look, and I love Batista. Okay, I love I love those sparklers for the wrestling events. But I don't agree with the comparison. We'll take the video of it and we'll just jump into this topic right now, and I'll tell you why. And I mean, I understand why they did it. So a lot of people I've seen talking about the sparklers at the start, like I'm not doing this to be funny. I'm just doing it as an example because I need to at least prove that it's happening, right? Some people say like, I've seen so much online, but you know, they're just kind of whining. But I've seen comparisons like this with Batista, Welcome to My Husband's Memorial. And they've got like of course, Batista is very famous for sparkler action as a wrestler. God, man. And he was one of the best wrestlers transitioned into acting, by the way. He's done it probably better than most. Him and John Cena are definitely top tier for being able to pull that off. Hogan, you don't speak ill to the dead. Anyway, point is, people were making that comparison, but I know Charlie Kirk's TPUSA loved those sparklers. Anytime they had anybody coming out, they would have like, here is Sebastian Gorka, and then they'd come out and it was like he was about to body slam like Nancy Pelosi directly through a table. You know, they were gonna have the Undertaker come out and tag team with. I mean, it always looked like that. Charlie Kirk loved that type of performance. He loved that type of like fireworks display. So doing this type of sparklers at his funeral, I mean, you know, from the people who immediately know him, I mean, it makes sense. I could understand like people, you know, will have like a certain drink that, you know, somebody likes at a funeral. People will play songs that people like at the funeral. So, I mean, it makes sense. Like people can, it is strange, right? But, you know, people say funerals are supposed to be a celebration of life, more than like just a time to like be sad and mourn. Of course, you do both, but that's the idea. It's more like something from The Boys, honestly. They've just been doing this forever. I want Batista at my funeral. That's another thing, you know. If I could have Batista come out and powerbomb my casket, that'd be cool, right? And if that's how I decide to go out, I mean, that's my final wish. And honestly, the idea of Charlie Kirk wanting this at his funeral is not hard for me to believe. You know, he was a particularly flashy fella. His funeral felt like a Trump rally, not a funeral. Oh, I'm not talking about what was said at the funeral. Some things that were said at the funeral were not good. No bueno. No bueno. But I'm just talking about this specific thing that people were mocking. Like, all I'm saying is I understand it. I understand it knowing how Charlie Kirk presented himself, how he ran these Turning Point USA events, how he liked to present like conservatives like superstars. Like, you know, you might even find it cringe. You might not like it. But that's what he did. So like them doing it like this at his funeral is not that surprising to me. Again, if I could get Batista to powerbomb my casket, that'd be awesome. That'd be a Batista bomb straight through my casket. He could shoot a promo too. I'm about to send this war tourist to the afterlife. It'd be awesome, you know? It'd be fun. Anyway, we could look at a little bit. Oh, there's the Guar thing. We're going to that in a second. We could actually play some of her speech because I thought her speech wasn't that bad. I thought her memorial service was Pretty touching. I don't, I can't even say it wasn't that bad. It seemed like a very nice service. The only reason I'm even saying it in that context is because of some of the other things that were said by other speakers and what they chose to use this moment for in comparison to what she said. We can play a little bit here from her C-SPAN, from the C-SPAN broadcast of the Turning Point USA funeral. I'm calling it that because Turning Point USA was the broadcaster.
Fake Alec Kyle Parker gave Jack DeHarts a Tier 1 subscription. Dylan, I had a dream where I impersonated a cop, for no reason mind you, and you were my accomplice and also the district attorney somehow.
That wasn't a dream. That's just what we did last night. Anyway, here it is.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men, just like the one who took his life. That young man, on the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him.
So she gives a speech. She, talks, about her husband. She talks about forgiveness, as you can see here, Christian values, the Christian value of forgiveness. And I will say that this right here, this type of language about forgiveness, and this is, I remember somebody referred to it almost like a stabilization tech on Twitter. Like, this is a stabilizing tech for Christianity. It helps the country in some way, and it always depends on how you use it and when you selectively choose to forgive or when to use this type of language in the fallout of something like this. So I do think it's positive that this is the tone that she took. Of course, being able to say this about the person who shot your husband is extremely difficult, I imagine. Of course, I'm not in her head. I can't say what she's thinking. Some people I saw were questioning the genuineness of this. And I mean, you're not in her head. I'm not in her head. I don't know how she's going through it or how she's grieving. But this type of rhetoric, I do think is, I would say laudable in a moment like this. It's laudable. And if she's being 100% true with what she's saying, because I just imagine it's extremely difficult to forgive the person who shot your husband. And so it's just, there's some people who would maybe question if they were in that position, if they would be able to do that. If she has done that, that is, and something she's done it with her faith, that is an achievement through faith, right? That is achievement through her own conception of faith, how she has interacted with her faith. And so that's interesting to think about, on how different people's faith can manifest in moments like this, how it could be useful for them personally, how it could be useful societally. Now, there's another end of the spectrum when talking about what to say at this moment. And I'm going to show a portion from Donald Trump's section at the memorial, which went for 40-something minutes. Donald Trump spoke for quite some time, so this is not the entirety of the speech, and the speech did not only take this tone. He talked about a lot during the speech, including the 2020 election and other initiatives that I it was strange to choose a venue like this, in my opinion, to talk about the 2020 election and his continued position that the election was stolen despite all evidence. Definitely, since, you only have so much time, you have everybody's attention. And so I can understand maybe how he sees this as a strategic moment where you have the country's attention. You want to say things, but you have to be prudent in a moment like this, because if you just treat it like a campaign rally, well, then, I think a lot of people are going to be able to read into that. They're going to read into what you're using the moment for. It'd be one thing to talk about like the initiative of freedom of expression in a moment like something that might be tied to the events and the importance of, the free marketplace of ideas. I could see something like that. But going back to 2020, I mean, that's not what Charlie Kirk was about. He wasn't about 2020. He didn't go out there and deny Donald Trump's 2020 stuff. He wasn't like out there, Donald Trump is lying about. He didn't do that. I mean, he was in the conservative movement and he was close to the Donald Trump administration. I'm sure he picked and chose when to speak, and he was not somebody who was pushing back against those theories particularly hard. So, I mean, it's not like he was completely untied to it whatsoever, but that's just not what he was really about. So to choose this moment. But besides that, of course, he had a lot of nice things to say about Charlie. And then he talked about forgiveness and hate. And Trump chose this moment to say that he hates his opponents, not the shooter, not the person. Because I could, if he said, look, she forgives the shooter, I hate the shooter, I hate evil like that, or say something like that. Now, of course, the use of evil and Democrats synonymously in a lot of right-wing media, that's already pushing it, but he specifically says here, I hate my opponents. Listen to his tone of voice, because a lot of the pushback on critique at this has to do with the tone in which Trump was speaking in this moment. Let's listen. I mean, he did speak for over 40 minutes, so he did change tone a few times.
But through it all, the core of Charlie's message and his basic method never changed. It never really changed. He stayed the same person also. At every campus event, Charlie asked the people who disagreed with him to come forward, and instead of silencing them, he handed them a microphone and let them speak. And he'd convinced so many of them. It was a pretty amazing thing to watch, actually. Shortly before Charlie arrived on campus, the day he was assassinated, a staff member texted him that there were many critics and students who were opposed to his views, and rather strenuously in the crowd. And that actually made him feel good, because he wanted to convince them. He understood. He really did. He understood what was right, and he was right about that. A lot of it was based on common sense, by the way. Charlie wrote back to the staff member saying, I'm not here to fight them. I want to know them and love them, and I want to reach them and try and lead them into a great way of life in our country. In that private moment on his dying day, we find everything we need to know about who Charlie Kirk truly was. He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great, great purpose. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica. But now Erica can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent.
We thank you.
Thank you, NBC. So there's two ways of looking at that I've seen. Okay, the first, well, there's a few ways. Some people are like, yeah, I do hate your opponent, which is one of the problems about to talk about. But the first way is, in this moment, at this time, at a memorial service, where a lot of people who are grieving and angry are watching, to choose that moment to say, I hate, they might not hate their opponent. She's talked about forgiveness. He doesn't hate them. Charlie talked about, I hate them, right? To choose a moment like that, when you've got the whole country's attention, probably have one of the biggest crowds of your life, when, this is the time to calm the country down. Trump doesn't really know how to do that very well. Trump's not good at calming tensions. He's not good at bridging divides. He's not, people talk about him like as a great deal maker and stuff, but, making, sitting down and actually engaging in the process of negotiating to bring that, he's not good at turning down the temperature. He's really good at attacks, at keeping the fire on, at constant campaigning, keeping on the pressure, motivating through demonization of his opponents. Fascists is something he's thrown out too. I've seen a lot of critique of the word fascist. I've seen him thrown out evil. I've seen him thrown out demonic. I've seen him thrown out basically any pejorative that you could conceivably think of. I mean, his whole gimmick is like nicknames for these people, as well as like a lot of baseless accusations going back to the 2015 campaign about ties to like serial killers and Ted Cruz's father and Ben Carson like stealing elections in the primary campaigns that he didn't perform well in. Yeah, the first big stop the steal wasn't actually 2020. It was 2015, back during the Republican primary. Anytime Trump didn't particularly perform too well, he would just allege some style of large-scale fraud or cheating by his opponents. So, I mean, Donald Trump choosing this moment to say something like this, I think it's a lost opportunity. I think Trump could have helped his own image. I think Trump could have helped the country. I think Trump, just by not engaging in this type of rhetoric, I think he could have done a lot more to serve the country than to serve a punchline, right? Okay, we are well aware that Donald Trump can tell jokes. We are well aware. I don't know if a moment like this at a memorial service for somebody killed by political assassination, talking about hating your opponents, is the time or the place. Now, the defense on the other side is, listen to Trump's tone. This is a joke. He's saying, oh, maybe they'll convince me, yada, yada, yada. This is a joke. Okay. It might be a joke. It might not be a joke. Seems like it's made in with some levity. But we just saw somebody get arrested because they were threatening to go shoot up a gay bar in Charlie Kirk's name, right? What did this gay bar do to Charlie Kirk? Nothing. But it was a target of vulnerability from the quote unquote other side, because that's how a lot of people see the world, that was closest to him. You know, Dylan Roof, when they chose that black church, it wasn't because that black church was the epicenter of all black life. It was because it was a vulnerable target that was close to him, that could have a horrific impact, and he assumed that they would be vulnerable to attack and not be able to defend themselves. In that scenario, going into a house of worship like that. And so the people who are actually most vulnerable in times like this are not just people who are divisive figures who might be the target of political assassinations, as Trump has been the target of political assassinations. Charlie Kirk, obviously, Nancy Pelosi, Josh Shapiro, a bunch of different people have been targets of different attacks in their life. People in communities, frontline communities, when I say frontline, I want to say communities where, violence, this type of tension can lead to spikes in violence. Those people are in a lot more vulnerable position. They don't got Secret Service protecting them. They don't got, cops, protecting their office space 24/7. And so in a moment like this, I do think the president should decrease tensions using the tools that he has. This was one of the moments he had where he could speak to the country, and he decided to say he hates his opponents. We're well aware Trump can tell jokes. I want to see Trump help bring down the tensions, which is his job. His job is to be figurehead of the country. And, he might be angry at one side or angry at the other side. His job is to bring down tensions, period, because it's going to hurt all Americans if they continue to ratchet up. Nobody remembers the period of heightened political violence during the 70s, irrespective of what side you were on, as positive for the country or a good time to be alive near any of that. If you were near where any of those bombs went off, the tons and tons of bombings that did go off, it's not a good time to be alive. So whether or not it was made with levity, whether or not he was joking, you can also take from other statements and other times he was talking that maybe it isn't always made with levity. There's a fly that's been bothering me in here relentlessly. A single fly that has made its way into the room, and there's no open windows, so quite bothersome. But this is a moment where he's supposed to be uniting the country and doing that role as president. And when he has a back record of, calling his opponents fascists, calling them evil, calling them demonic, joking about Nancy Pelosi's husband being nearly murdered with a hammer, when he has a backlog of all of that to go off of, and people see him talk like this, people are going to think he's serious. And even if it was said with levity, would it be that crazy for somebody to treat this as serious, that if they were to ask Trump, do you hate them? And when he says opponents, when he says enemies, what does that mean? That's another thing. It's kept intentionally vague. And that's, that's not great, because people can then in their head, whatever their opponent was, they can just fill it in. Where Trump might be saying, my opponent is leftist extremists, right? And what that, again, still kind of vague, but what if somebody down there, like, my opponent is, okay, it was this minority group, or it's, it's the LGBTQ, as that one person who wanted to go shoot up that gay bar thought in the fallout of Charlie Kirk's assassination. And so when a lot of people are listening, including those types of crazies, well, you don't need to completely dumb down your language to assume that at any time anyone in the audience could just go off and just start going kablamo. You do need to have some prudence when you're the president of the United States in the fallout of a major political assassination, when tensions are acknowledged by all to be incredibly high right now. And I think Erica Kirk did a much better job at that. Oh, I also probably wouldn't invite people like Benny Johnson probably to an event if that was my purpose.